Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 244th session of the online Optom Learning Series, OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Dr. Najiya. Dr. Najiya has her bachelor's and master's of optometry degree from the Elite School of Optometry. She was also very recently awarded her Doctor of Philosophy, which is PhD, from the University of Erasmus, Rotterdam, based in the Netherlands. And with her passion in research, I think she's continuing her postdoctoral research with the same group of researchers based in the Netherlands. Her areas of interest are understanding the functional consequences of glaucoma through tasks involving visual motor integration. And with all that passion, she also continues mentoring students, guiding students, postgraduates, as well as the doctoral research students in the university, as well as at Shankar Netrawala. She was also awarded various awards, including the Best Outgoing Student for her bachelor's, as well as for a postgraduate, which is the master's degree program. And she also has been awarded the fellowship by the American Academy of Optometry in the scientific category. And that's why I thought it was a good idea for her to come and speak to us about how can we start writing our research activities, or whatever. It may not be research, I think it may be a case study, but what she's going to focus is how can we do this as a beginner and as first timer. So welcome, Dr. Najiya, onto our platform, and let me just leave the screen time to you, please.
Thank you, Fakhruddin, for the warm welcome, and to the OOLS team for including me in your renowned webinar series. Hello to all those who have joined us today, and also who will listen to the session maybe later in time. Let me start with um, a little bit of behind the scene narration. So I received this invite and happily accepted to be a part. Uh, I wasn't very certain about what should be the topic of discussion. OOLS, as you already know, has um, already crossed more than 240 sessions covering a wide variety of topics under the wing of optometry and vision science. So I took some time to think about the same, and I think it was during that week I got to interact with a bunch of students who were pursuing their masters in optometry and writing their first research manuscript. Surprisingly, they all had some similar patterns of approach and comparable blocks or challenges when it came to the course of scientific writing. And they were more or less the same ones I faced, still facing, during the early phase of my research career. Uh, then I thought, why don't I use this great platform to discuss the same? So that is why here we are to um, decode art of scientific writing with a specific focus on the beginners. Um, so we all know research is a process that is undertaken to create new knowledge or use any existing knowledge differently to make new impressions or generate new concepts. Research is indeed mandatory in the field of medical sciences as it is vital for expanding scientific knowledge to improve, eventually to improve the patient care. So the process of research typically follows a systematic pattern that involves the identification of a research problem, formulation of a hypothesis and a research question, um, design of a study plan to investigate a question or maybe a set of questions, collection of data and its accurate documentation without missing any critical information, and analysis and interpretation of that data or information to draw relevant conclusions. Uh, Finally, after crossing all the essential steps, there comes the happy ending, the stage of scientific writing and publishing. Um, by the way, why do researchers publish their work? One, it is, of course, a powerful method to display professional talent to peers. And the publication brings attention not just to the researchers, but also to the institutions which is hosting the research. Um, and moreover, the insights from publications contribute to the literature, um, pave the way for future research and collaborations, and as I said, eventually contribute to patient care in some format. So, to publish a piece of scientific information, we should know the art of scientific writing, which is basically a prominent uh, genre of technical writing that communicates um, scientific information to other researchers or scientists in various forms, which can be in any form, such as original article, review article, thesis, letter to the editor, etc. And our major focus is going to be on the preparation of an original journal. So, um, coming to this slide, uh, I'm someone who started my journey of publication in the year 2018, and my art is not that high, which means I don't even know if I have already crossed the beginner level category in this field, but uh, whatever situations I have either gone through or witnessed might help some of you at least when you take your journey. I hope so. So it was during the first year of my PhD, I submitted my first draft of manuscript to my co-promoter, um, believing that I wrote it fairly well. Of course, not 100% perfect, but I was assuming, yeah, maybe I did a fairly good job. I was very confident until he read it and called me to his office and said, "Good attempt, but you have long way to go." And I saw the draft with red marks all over it, including my own name. I was like, okay, um, my I was not smiling like this. Then my smile faded off instantly because that was the sort of first impression I could have made with my so-called writing skills. So he immediately understood my disappointment, and he told me, um, never ever jump directly into writing text. Take a blank paper and picture what you want to write and describe your story in a desired sequence with text and illustrations. Like they can be figures, graphs, tables, flowcharts, and uh, that actually makes the best first step. And when you are at a point where your framework is like satisfactorily ready, then it is the right time for you to stretch, elaborate, describe, and describe it. For the um, yeah, at first it was hard to take because during in the graduation and post graduation we are pampered with a lot of compliments and things, and it takes a little bit of hurt to take in all the critical feedback. But for the conclusion of the story, we have made close to 40 drafts of that manuscript, which was submitted to Graphics Archive for Clinical and Experimental Ophthalmology and was accepted with a minor revision. And that was my first PhD paper. Um, and from this whole story comes my first key point. Always remember to start with a framework or an outline. The outline basically helps us in a great extent to have a very organized pattern and even an early idea of the final output. It drives us through the process of writing in a very logical way. Now that we are dealing with an original article, the article is supposed to have various parts, starting with the core components called the IMRAT, which are introduction or background, materials and methods, results, discussion, and conclusions. So when we prep the outline, it should have all the critical points under each of the section. So once an outline is ready, uh, you definitely have to discuss it with your supervisor or peer or co-authors. See if any sort of alterations are needed at that point in time. And when that turns out to be a tentative framework, then start expanding the points step by step. Um, Personally, I prefer to start with the method section, but here just to ensure the flow and beginning with the introduction. Or sometimes you might see the word background. So this is the opening section of the article. In simple terms, introduction tells what is already known in literature and what is unknown, and clearly outlines why that particular research matters. Um, an introduction is actually an opportunity given to the authors to provide readers with the background necessary to understand a text, which means intro is the scene setter. So the primary key to writing an introduction is to start with a strong opening statement. So we generally, they say, go to broader details and slowly trim down to specific information. So the opening statement can be something that says about the general area of research in which the project takes place, and then the specific background followed by the relevant set of publications that investigated a similar research question. Here it is so important to avoid vague overviews and add only works that are directly connected to the research question. Um, Here I would like to emphasize maybe one more point to that we should always try to maintain a literature summary table or even a spreadsheet with at least the key points from each of the reference sources. And trust me, this exercise helps a lot throughout the process of writing, especially the introduction and discussion section. So after summarizing what is known, then you have to start highlighting what is missing in the current research landscape. This basically denotes the identified gaps in the literature and rationale of the present research. Following this, the research hypothesis, study aim, objectives can be stated. Um, it is important to remember to keep this section very short, crisp, and ensure to start with the preparation of the background, discussion of the basic references, and an indication of the focus. So among all the components of an article, conventionally materials and methods section has been reported as the most easily written section. I'm sure many researchers, including me, start manuscript drafting with this section because this gives a lot of confidence and a good writing flow in general than any other section. But although this is an easy section when compared to the other sections, a major reason for rejecting a paper might also be this. So we should take due care while preparing this section. Um, in this segment, we should describe exactly and in detail how the study was done so that the readers will be able to understand or assess how the research was done and also to repeat the study protocol if they wish to. So the outline for this segment might be good if it is in the form of, instead of the text, if you have a flow chart made, because that sequence will help us to navigate very logically through the step-by-step process, just like an instruction or tutorials in a cookbook. So we start by restating the research statement as an opening statement to the section, which is what are we going to cook, and then how the research was carried out in a chronological, logical sequence, which is how did we. So how do we begin? We start by telling what were our ingredients, how did we chop it, how much amount we took, etc. Right? So just like the same, here we start to describe our study sample, the way we define them, the inclusion exclusion criteria. So those are the ingredients and they are ready. And soon after that, we should start to describe how did we collect data, how did we collect, how did we uh, design the protocol or which procedures were done after the data was collected, how did we proceed with the statistical analysis, what tool did we use, etc. So it is actually exactly like how we describe cooking a dish. So it's like how a cooking instruction goes. Um, Once the materials and method tentative section is ready in your hand, just have a sort of checklist to look for the following details. Um, did we have enough? Did we give enough details regarding who were our participants? Um, where were they recruited from? How did we define them? What selection criteria we used? Did we give enough details about the methods that we followed? So while dealing with the subject recruitment, be very sure to add a statement about the ethical considerations, including details of the obtainment of informed consent, and the IRB related declaration, like it was reviewed and accepted by the ethical committee, etc. And ensure all the procedures are described with appropriate details, including the statistical approaches. So when the intro says what new dish you're gonna prep, methods tell the readers how we made the dish. So intro and methods is roughly ready. We go to the result section, uh, which will describe what we found. So here we should report all relevant results very concisely and objectively in a logical sequence. Uh, Here we should use a combination of text and illustrative materials like figures and tables to describe our findings. So it is nice to start with a description of the participants and then go into inferential or more granular ones. If we are writing down, for example, quantitative research, the most logical way to structure the result is to frame them around the list of research hypotheses we have. So for each of the hypothesis or research question, we can state the type of analysis and then a concise summary of each relevant result. Um, Then we start with a brief statement of how each result relates to the questions or hypothesis. And then we should uh, also remember not to include sort of subjective interpretations, for example, why we found these results or what they mean or any such evaluation can be saved for later when we do the discussion section. Um, So in quantitative research, it's often helpful to contain visual elements such as graphs and tables if they are directly relevant to your results. Um, if you are including any such visual elements, it would definitely add value to the storyline. But we should be very careful that it is appropriately chosen so that it is best representing the data. You have come across multiple types of graphs, including bars, scatter, box plots, etc. And this should be wisely chosen and if it can visualize trends and relationship. So these figures can actually give at a glance illustration of our key findings. So when we use figures, again, I'm emphasizing the point that these figures should best suit the data that we are going to represent. And when we use figures, let them be of any type, we should ensure that the features of the figures, including units, data labels, and like all the elements of or the features of the figures are in place, plus a well written figure legend is very mandatory. That means the figure should be a standalone item in the manuscript. So, in addition to all these features in the figure legend, the dimensions and quality of the figures are also very important and should be taken care of. There are multiple tools available to generate high resolution figures, for example, Microsoft Publisher, so that we can set it at a desired quality while submitting it to the journal. Um, yeah, here I would like to give an additional point. Always remember to keep an editable version of your figures, that is the source file, in addition to the image format file, or else in case you don't have it at some point in time, then use converting tools that will help to convert the image file to any editable like vector format. Um, that's about the figures. And coming to the tables, they're used to display exact values and to give a concise overview of various results. So we should remember not to use tables and figures to describe the same results. Um, and we should always remember to mention any tables or figures used within the text. So just like the figures, tables also should carry all the relevant features, including the number, title, appropriate subheadings, footnotes, etc. So we have the introduction, materials and methods, the key findings and the results. Now comes the discussion section. This is actually most difficult part, at least for me, and maybe for a good mm, proportion of researchers. This section can be divided into, just generally saying, this can be divided into three different subsections like introductory paragraphs, intermediate paragraphs, and concluding paragraphs. This is within the discussion section. So the introductory paragraph of the discussion is generally recommended to contain the main idea of performing the study question and a summary of the basic findings of the study. Here, this is tricky because we should be very careful not to repeat the exact introduction and result section of the manuscript. So after we have the introductory paragraph of the discussion, this is sort of an opening paragraph to discussion. We can start with the intermediate paragraphs. So these paragraphs can start with a solid, that is indisputable sentence about the topic to be discussed, which will be the answer to the question, what have we found? So then we can have sentences associated with the subject matter uh, to be discussed, like the sentences that are associated with the key findings can be discussed and written. Next, we should focus to highlight the current literature that are associated with that specific research question, and that literature can be compared and contrasted with the findings that we mentioned, and they can be discussed. So whenever our findings are either agreeing or not agreeing with, or which is with what is already known in the literature, we should state the scientifically backed up reasons for such observations. So we can also comment the new insights generated from the research study if it is not cannot be compared with whatever is known in the literature. So here again, if you have already set a literature summary table, which I told you during the introduction section, with all relevant resources, the sources of literature listed with their key findings, it's gonna be um, a wonderful exercise because it will ease the kind of comparison and contrasting exercise that we are doing with the literature available. Very common mistake made in this particular section is adding a lot of references and irrelevancy between the references. So unless we are writing, for example, a review article, uh, be very sure to consider the most relevant articles in the intro as well as the discussion section. So we have the introductory paragraph of the discussion, we have the intermediate paragraph of the discussion. Now we have the concluding paragraphs of the discussion section, which can be set with study limitations and future recommendations. So, how long should be this discussion paragraph? So, generally, a, uh, it is recommended that the length of the discussion section is should not be exceeding the sum of other sections, that is, introduction, methods, and results. Um, then we come to the conclusion section. Um, we conclude a research paper where we wrap up the paper by leaving a strong final impression. So, sorry. So now we have the introduction in place, materials and methods, discussion, and results, discussion, conclusion. So the body of the article is tentatively ready. Then it is time to write the abstract, which is the summary, usually 300 words or less, wherein the major aspects of the entire paper are set in a prescribed sequence. So, abstract can be structured with sections like purpose, methods, and conclusions, or even unstructured with no subheadings but put in single paragraph mode. So, the abstract is a very key aspect of the paper and helps readers decide whether uh, they want to read the rest of the paper. So, how do we know if enough information is in the abstract? A simple task that can be done is uh, just read the abstract, imagining yourself as a third person uh, who is not in the author list. Then ask yourself if this abstract was the only piece of or part of the paper you could access, would you be interested or satisfied with the amount of information presented there? Does it tell the whole story about your study in a nutshell? If the answer is yes, then you are good to go. But if it is no, then the abstract likely needs to be revised. And along with the abstract, we have to come up with a couple of relevant keywords. After all these major components, we go to the crown of the paper, the title. Making a title is one of the most important decisions when writing an article to publish in journals. The research title is a key, right? A key thing that journal editors and reviewers see when they look at your paper, and also a first line information that fellow researchers will see in a database once the paper is out there. Um, so, a good, concise title containing all the relevant terms in is very vital to increase the visibility of a paper. So while deciding on the title for a research paper, we should make sure that it captures, at least captures the uh, very relevant aspects of our study, including the specific topic and problem which is being investigated. Um, From the crown, we move to the tail end, which is the list of references. Citation and the list of references are so important because of many reasons. The first is to acknowledge the contribution of other researchers in your field. Like, how did they indirectly contribute to the research that you have carried out? And also to give access to the readers to refer to related pieces of research. When we deal with multiple references, it is always better to rely on reference management tools, which helps us to organize, annotate, and manage our references. From the list of references, there are other accessory parts also to a manuscript, which will include a title page with an author list, affiliations, address for correspondence, declaration of conflict of interest, if any, um, even supplementary figures or tables which didn't go into the manuscript main body, but you want to give additional information, then it goes as a supplementary document, acknowledgement statement. So, with all these elements, we have an almost grown up manuscript in hand. Um, In recent days, you would have come across AI powered paraphrasing tools. They're available to quickly reword text by replacing certain words with synonyms or reconstructing the entire sentences. This is a very good support, but should be used as a guide, not as a complete substitute in your writing journey. So please remember to use the tools wisely combined with manual efforts. Um, so after discussing all the key points, assume you have a full length manuscript draft and it is time to share it with other co-authors for their critical review and feedback. Maybe here I should tell one more story. I'm going to tell you about two of my mistakes during the preparation of a manuscript, specifically during the revision stage. Um, so once we had a full-length manuscript, we shared it with the co-authors for their valuable feedback. And one of the authors gave a list of suggestions, which is as expected, thanks to him or her. Um, Most of them were extremely useful and were rightly incorporated into the paper. But a couple of points were a bit um, far-fetched, which could be saved while addressing a subsequent paper or while addressing a follow-up research question. Since it was my first time, I just incorporated all the remarks from the senior co-author. And with the revised manuscript, I again went back to the corresponding author, and he was like, uh, "No, this is not the way I envisioned the paper to be." I was like, yeah, but the senior author suggested and I revised the paper accordingly. Then he again sat me down and told me that uh, when feedback is received from peers, it need not be instantly incorporated in the paper. Go through each of the comments very carefully, critically, evaluate them, and see if those suggestions uh, are worth enough to be incorporated in the paper? Is it really contributing to improve the clarity and quality of the paper? If yes, accept. If no, politely reject. This was a real learning. And you know what? Instead of saving all the drafts, I was revising the core document. That became another lesson learned in a hard way. So during the stage of revision, keep all the drafts in a single folder with draft numbers in sequence. So you have them all in case you want to go back to a previous draft. Maybe you have heard this popular quote called that goes like this: Fools learn from their own mistakes, whereas wise men learn from those mistakes. So be wise. Okay. we prep the manuscript, revisions is done, it is getting finalized, and now it is time to pitch take the step towards journal submission to reach the destination of the whole journey. Um, Here, I would like to mention about a few ethical issues that might be involved in scientific writing, which we have to really take into consideration during the process. The first point is plagiarism, the most common form of scientific misconduct, which occurs often among researchers, unfortunately. And several forms of plagiarism are encountered in scientific writing. For example, intentional plagiarism is one in which a person knowingly lifts text directly from other authors without giving appropriate credit. Uh, Another type is, for example, duplicate publication, which occurs when an author submits the publication, submits for a publication, uh, which is already or a previously published work, but pretends like it is the first time or the original work. Um, Next, a mention about authorship. There is already a well-defined set of rules to be followed while listing the authors. Uh, Several forms of authorship abuse are also reported. For example, honorary, guest, or gift authorship that is awarded to acknowledge friendship, to gain favor, or uh, give the paper a greater sense of acceptability. Um, and and other thing is denial of authorship, where a work is published without providing authorship or acknowledgement to people who made substantial contributions to the work. Um, One other ethical issue is salami slicing, where uh, people slice or segment a data set when they don't have substantial insights. This purely to increase the number of publications. So this is, in a nutshell, the ethics in scientific writing. Um, so far, I have been talking about the original research paper. But if you are preparing a case report or case series, the components will be different because it will have a title, abstract, introduction, the case description or summary, and then the discussion and conclusions. But the overall writing process will remain the same, more or less. And yeah, this is for the master students, and specific if you are in the process of writing a thesis or going to write a thesis. Again, the new chapters are introduced and the new sections are introduced, and this is going to be way more elaborate when compared to a compact manuscript. You know that. So if you are in this stage, please realize that um, this is going to take a lot of time than you expect. So set your timeline, a feasible Gantt chart, and start writing in parallel with the data collection so that you get enough time to project your hard work in the best possible way. And again, for the thesis, the outlining works, the drafting, revising, and everything that stay the same, which I told during the original article preparation. Um, yeah, maybe a final point. Research happens all around the globe, right? And if you have really taken a lot of uh, effort and energy to investigate a research question, uh, don't wait or hold, uh, or don't lose time to start writing, and so that you can go to the publication stage as soon as possible, because in parallel, some other research group might be investigating the research gap that you have already stated in your paper. That means the whole relevance or possibility of getting your research published goes really low if you like keep waiting or for a nice time to sit and write. So do it as quickly as you finalize your key findings. That is why I was emphasizing the point that as and when the data collection is going on, start prepping the rest of the sections. Just leave in the results and the discussion so you can go to the publication stage as early as possible. Um, that's all from me, and I would be happy to take up any questions or maybe any sort of discussion points.
Thank you, Dr. Najiya, for that wonderful talk. I think a couple of key important points which you covered, which are really important. I think one of it was, referencing, and Dr. Gopi is also mentioning in the chat that just because of the referencing style being incorrect, there may be rejections, and he has unfortunately had that opportunity to face rejection just because of the referencing style being not appropriate as per the journal requirements. So I think that is something which you also brought it up, to use the reference managers and things like that. Would you like to highlight anything more about referencing, anything which comes to your mind when it comes to citing or referencing to be accurate?
Um, yeah, one common thing that we usually do is we go to a reference which is actually uh, which has cited a mother article, the core paper, the original work. So instead of citing original work, we tend to go to the recently published work and then give the citation to that particular article without giving credits to the original researcher. So that is a very common one. And then the sequence of citing, especially when we are doing that manually, especially the bachelor or master student, when they start to take reference or citation from the Google Scholar and start doing the citation and referencing manually, they tend to add, for example, one and then the next number is seven and then two. So there is some sort of universal standard, recommended standards that have to be followed during the referencing and citation. So, uh, like the using the tools make it more easy, but just have a manual recheck on whether everything is in place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. I think I agree with that, and I face that problem as well. Even though Mendeley and Zotero is the one I use it more frequently,
commonly,
you can directly extract papers or through that, plugins in your Google Chrome. But
yeah,
what happens is, sometimes the data which is acquired from by the plugin may not be good enough. So instead of author's name, some papers they put author's name, comma, their highest qualification, right? So for example,
yeah,
Dr. Najiya, comma, PhD. So the
yeah.
PhD becomes a second author rather than deleting. So these are not
We
really
just,
great, and I
yeah.
think a manual check is really very important. It does make it life much easy, so you don't miss out the sequence, and then your bibliography is generated and you can change the referencing style. But I think it's very important to manually check. Wonderful, great. So we have a couple of questions there. One of it was regarding, you did mention about, getting it proofreaded from your co-authors or your experts in the field. Any suggestions in cases of, if we don't have a co-author, probably you are doing solo research and you don't have a co-author, would you recommend us to go to the mentors, or any other recommendations to get proofreading, or use some tools online? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Viraj, for the question. Yeah, unfortunately, I have had experts and senior mentors around me to upgrade the quality of my writing. And in case it is a situation that you are not able to go for peer reviews or review from your co-authors, there are online tools available, even tools or plugins that are attached to the journal website itself, where you can go for grammar or linguistic consultation, where they can give you expert opinions on how to improve the overall quality of the writing, especially when we are, from uh, non non-English speaking people, and if you have issues with the quality of writing, especially in the language, then I think there are multiple options available to be approached, and then they can give linguistic services. And even while you submit the paper to the journal, you might have seen a couple of links that they give as additional links where you can access the service through the journal itself. So um, yeah, we have options available for improving the standards of writing.
Correct.
I
Yeah,
hope
yeah,
the
I would agree. Yeah, even Microsoft Word has, an inbuilt
yeah,
feature which allows you to look at the grammar,
yeah,
the punctuations, a basic one. I think Grammarly is something which is widely used. And as you mentioned, also some journal also help you, with the editing. But again, it's a paid uh,
yeah, it's big.
thing, so you will
Yeah,
have to consider it as an additional expense to your publication fees. So just bear in mind. Wonderful, great. Another question by Viraj as well. I'm just going to put it up here. This is again, I think, a commonly, encountered problem when you have multiple co-authors working on the manuscript and you send it out for review and they come in back with comments. And how do you manage it to make it simple? What key message or strategy you have applied or used to make life easy?
yeah. The first point is, even if we have multiple, this is very personal, multiple authors on the list, it is very important to have a key author who will actually manage the entire preparation process, like first draft of the manuscript, look into each suggestions given by the co-authors, discuss that with the corresponding author, whether that comments are worth incorporating or not. So the key author is uh, should be a single person, and that makes it way more easier, so that we don't have multiple co-authors working on the same draft at the same point in time. But in case for example, if there is a situation that multiple authors are writing different sections of a paper, like I'm writing the introduction, somebody else is writing the materials and methods or discussion, we have to ensure a good coherence is there between the information that we are uh, putting out, because finally when we start to club in all the information, especially the introduction and the discussion section should have a very logical coherence of in information. So if multiple authors are writing the paper at the same point in time, make sure that there are boundaries, but blurry boundaries, introduction, materials, results, and discussion. Otherwise, the a single author can be the key author who will, navigate everybody through the process of drafting and taking it to the submission stage.
Yeah, right. And I think you did mention in your story as well, take the points which you think
Yeah.
improve the quality of manuscript and justify why are you not incorporating the ones and rejecting the ones. So I think you did mention as
Yeah.
well a little bit
Yeah.
on that
And
as well, right?
it typically happens, when you are in the first stage of your writing, and you think whatever the senior authors are saying is should be there in the manuscript.
Yeah.
So that is the Yeah, but no offense, but we have to really critically look into all the suggestions and see whether, okay, it should be in the paper, then yes, if no, then talk to them and convince them, giving justifications why it cannot
Justifications.
be in the paper. And yeah,
Yeah, that's right. And another question is, the use of artificial intelligence. what's your advice? Should AI be used in writing a paper? And yes or no, and why yes or why no, perhaps?
Yeah, recent times we have seen a lot of AI incorporated writing tools, not just in writing, but also in reviewing literature, making summary of the literature. Like you just feed in the article and then you get a good, concise summary of the paper. That actually all those tools helps a, a lot in writing paper, especially when you are, in beginning stage and then you need some kind of support for the writing process. But please keep in mind that these are artificial intelligence, so these are subjected to errors. So instead of relying completely on them, it is better to have a combination of manual plus technical assistance, in my opinion.
No, I was mentioning that yes, AI is really taking up a lot of work from us in terms of, I would say, supplementing rather than completely taking over. Like as you said, we need to make sure about what is happening and be very vigilant about this as well in terms of whatever we are taking up from the AI. Sometimes the references what AI really gives us. Maybe they are not there also. So make a thorough search of it, and
Yeah,
yeah, take it as a guidance, as Dr. Najiya is mentioning, and
absolutely.
rather than
Yeah,
asking them to write an entire paper. Right.
yeah, yeah. And even for the plagiarism check, there are plagiarism tools which look at which is an AI generated text and not a human generated one. So you have to be careful with that check as well.
Right, yeah. We had a session, just taking up the liberty, Dr. Nadia. We had a session about AI and research tools, and it is available on our YouTube channel. Dr.
Yeah,
Gopi is the one who did that
yeah,
session,
I
and
have listened
uh,
to it. Yeah,
yeah, so probably I think Dr. Meena is asking about the link, and yeah, that's the link which Dr. Gopi has also shared. So yes, you can watch that and get some ideas and what tools are available. There are various tools which are available, which can be useful for your writing and supplement, help you in your writing. Wonderful, great. There's one more question, which I think directly came to my chat. You did also mention about journal selection. So, what are your personal thoughts on how should we go about selecting the journal? Should we go directly straight up ahead and choose the best journal, or do you recommend that we should start from the Q2, Q4 journals and then have our way up through the Q1. Any thoughts over that?
yeah. I didn't go in detail to the journal selection because it was. That's why I was just briefly mentioning about. Okay, now it is the time to start selecting the journal and then proceed with the submission. Um, Personally, I feel the best way to find the most suitable journal for your work is from your references. Like, see which kind of journal have encouraged the submission of related research. If I see, okay, Graphes has published in the recent past the research that are very similar to what I'm investigating, then it is very apparent that their crowd is more interested in reading that kind of research. So references actually gives you a lead to choose journal. And next point is whether it is of course, it should be a peer-reviewed uh, with a PubMed index or Scopus Index 1. And the other point is the financial support that you have if you can go for an open or a closed journal. So, depending on the funding and the financial backup you have for the publication, you have to filter out uh, expensive journals. Um, The other one is to look for the basic index or the metrics related to the journals, like their impact factor and the number of citations that they get. So For me, I will still stand with the first point because start reading your core articles and see which kind of journal had a lot of interest in publishing that kind of research. That actually gives you a lot more possibility to get published. And sometimes some journals give some special invites, right? Issues are upcoming in a couple of months, like, for example, exclusively on low vision and glaucoma. Then you can actually buckle up and fasten your writing so that you can aim for that special issue and you have a high chance of getting into that.
Yeah.
Other one is if your corresponding author is on the editorial or the peer review crew of the journal, then you get a little bit of more priorities when you submit it. Not acceptance is assured, but you do get some priorities, and they know what kind of work the journal is accepting in a greater extent. So multiple things, and then discuss with your corresponding author or the senior authors who have a lot more experience in publishing. So yeah,
Yeah.
all things put together is a good strategy, I think. And there are also
Right.
journal selection tools. For example, Elsevier is giving journal selection tools where you can just put in your abstract and see which kind of journal fits well for your work. So manual plus again tech tools are will be helpful in
Will
selecting
be
the journal.
helpful. Wonderful. Great. And just on the topic of journal, we will take this one last question, Dr. Najiya. Uh, do you select the journal and write the paper, or you write the paper and edit the paper according to the journal? What do you think would be the best idea?
Personally, when we start writing the paper and then if it is like slowly shaping up into a good full-fledged draft, then we start to discuss about the journal. Uh, but even before that, we do keep a list of potential journals, considering all the factors that I discussed before. So you can do it at any point in time, not maybe after you finish all the drafting and finalizing. Maybe that is too late to start thinking about the journal. So yeah, maybe in parallel and look at potential journals.
Correct.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
would be,
I think I would agree as well, because once you are writing your first draft, you will have in the back of the mind the idea of what journals are you
yeah,
aiming, and the
yeah,
best way is to go to the journals and read their instructions to authors. Most of the time, I think they are almost similar, except most journals have a different way of writing the abstracts in the majority of cases, and their
yeah,
referencing style. Otherwise, the main body is kind of
yeah,
similar
more or
in most
less,
of
yes,
the journal, more or less, right? So
yes,
I think that
yeah.
that's something important which you can think about when you are writing your drafts. Yeah, I think the
And the
abstract is
scope
very
of the
important, as you
journal.
mentioned. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, and the scope of the journal is if you're preparing a manuscript from a very technical perspective, introducing a specific uh, technique, for example, development and validation of that technique, and it might not be of great interest to the clinicians because it is in the development stage, then you have to approach that kind of a technical journal, for example, translational journals, and not the end, like actually the clinician crowd. So depending on the scope of uh, the journal, you can filter out and then decide to
right,
choose.
right. Yeah, wonderful, great. So I think we have discussed almost all questions on the chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Najiya, for inspiring. I think inspiring all of us to keep writing and not just do research but not publish. I think this is a step we need to take forward to kind of push ourselves and write it up and make sure we add to the important scientific evidence in the literature as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Najiya, for doing this with
Thank
us.
you. Yeah, and thank you to Gopi for your comments.
Yeah, Dr. Gopi has been busy, us answering as well and giving his thoughts. He's
Yeah.
done the AI session and he's also very enthusiastic and a supportive researcher as well. So thank you, Dr. Gopi, and all the others for your questions and comments in the chat.
Yeah.
So thank you
Thank you
everyone
so
for
much.
attending. Until then, take care, be safe. We will be sending more details about our future sessions onto the social media and to the email. Until then, take care, and I hope to see you
Thank
during
you.
the next session. Thank you, Dr. Nadia.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, you too.